Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Pamela, and you are watching Pam Entertainment TV, where we review movies, television series, and do celebrity legal news. Also, join me for my pop culture chats. If you'd like to support the channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. My Venmo and Cash App is below. Thank you so much, and let's get started.
All right, people. Let me make sure that my sound is sound. You all can hear me. All right. Y'all, I'm keeping you all abreast of what goings ons that Mr. Sean Combs, aka Diddy, aka Puffy, has going on. He is working hard to get out of custody before he is sentenced in October. And so I read the letters that initially that he put out, and I also read that 62-page. Uh, anyway, so the prosecution responded, and so now the defense has responded, and also looks like the young lady that was supposed to be victim number 3, Gina, she has also written a letter of support for Diddy. So let's do this. Let me share first. Let me put all my little stuff up. Copyright disclaimer under the Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for the fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. And once again, the views and opinions expressed in my videos represents my own thoughts and concerns and analysis. I do not know these entities or persons personally, and my opinions are not statement of fact. Allegedly, allegedly, allegedly. All right, people. Let's go over this. So here is the letter, and I will read it. This particular letter, this is their response. Is a letter reply to respond to motion by Sean Combs to address to Judge Subramaniam from Mark Agnafilio, dated 8/3/2025. Letter motion addressed to the judge to request release on conditions. So here we go. Sean Combs, through his leak to his counsel, submit this brief. Let's make it bigger. This brief letter in reply to the governor's response to his motion for release on conditions pending sentencing. Impervious to the jury's verdict, the government proceeds as though Combs was not acquitted of trafficking and racketeering conspiracy, along with all the racketeering acts with which he was charged and found not guilty. Hell bent on punishing him for being a user of the prostitute services in a more draconian manner than anyone in the U.S. history, the government continues to target him unfairly, just as it has done from the inception of this provable misplaced investigation. Despite the jury's verdict, it continues to make factual statements that are plainly at odds with what 12 New Yorkers found and tried to keep Combs incarcerated, even though the jury rejected the serious charges that led to his pre-trial detention in the first place. Specifically, the government argues that Combs, 1, has failed to meet the standards for reconsideration, 2, does not show exceptional circumstances, and 3, cannot reasonably show Combs' appearance in court or the safety of the community. For the reasons stated below, the government arguments all fail. It says the court has ample authority to grant bail. The government first argues that Combs' bail application should be considered as a motion for reconsideration by the court. However, as the government acknowledges in a footnote, the Bail Reform Act is, quote, silent on when and if a district judge may consider his or her own detention order pending sentencing. And then it lists the cited cases. The government also concedes, as it must, that the court can reconsider its discussion under its inherent power to reconsider his own ruling. And then it cites the sources. But all of this, but but all the cases cited by the government discuss bail pending appeal and pursuant to 18 USC section 33141B. This court may order that pending imposition or execution of sentence or pending appeal of conviction or sentence, a person be released. Thus, the court may revisit its bail determination at any time. This makes sense, as courts routinely modify conditions of bail pending sentencing to allow for travel or many other circumstances, and the high standard of reconsideration is not considered. Accordingly, this court may consider this application without treating it as a motion for reconsideration. This is especially true given the exigencies of July 2nd, 2025, where the jury reached a verdict on the morning and the parties were arguing bail several hours later the same day. Unlike a more traditional setting for motions, where parties typically have days, if not weeks, to consider the facts, the law and their arguments, the events of July 2nd were fast moving, and it was impossible for the parties to review the scores of Mann Act cases to fashion an appropriate argument to the court. Excuse me. For these reasons, we submit that the court has ample discretion to consider this application. Exceptional reasons exist because both of the facts underlying this conviction and conditions at the MDC. And if we read the last letter, they were saying that the conditions at the MDC were precarious. However, the prosecution came back and said, look, the staffing levels have increased to they're like 90%. The other conditions are favorable because of the staffing issues have been done. So let's continue what they're going over. The government argues that Combs has failed to show the need to prevent a manifest injustice as required, ECF 488 at 3. The government claims the defense has already argued exceptional circumstances based on a comparison of this case to other Mann Act conviction, but that was a hurried application the day of the verdict based on a, quote, very quick review over the course of the day of other Mann Act cases. That, quote, quick review yielded 4 cases which counsel distinguished at the hearing. After distinguishing just these 4 cases, counsels argued that they provided a strong argument for a reasonable sentence in this case, and that counsel would try to get Combs sentenced as soon as possible. You remember, they were going back and forth and they were trying to get the date pushed up for the sentencing. And then it worked, they were scrambling. And then it just worked out that all of that scrambling led for them to just keep the October 3rd date. Now, with the benefit of further research, counsel has reviewed scores of cases from across the country and submits this renewed motion for bail showing that exceptional circumstances exist to warrant release pending sentencing. There have been no remotely similar Mann Act convictions, and the cases the government cited are distinguishable. For the purpose of this application, we assume that the Mann Act requires detention post-verdict subject to exceptional circumstances. However, as shown in our original application of July 29, 2025, the statute has been reserved for instances where people, primarily women, were forced into the prostitute, where children are lured or forced into the prostitute, and where the defendant is motivated by profiting from the business. It has quite literally never been applied to the facts here, where a male defendant and his longtime companion agree to bring other males into their adult consensual relationship. The government is unable to and does not attempt to dispute this point, which alone amounts to an exceptional reason for release. Now, as I've said before, they are arguing that the escorts were legally purchased for their time, and that he had been convicted. He wasn't the one having the intimate relationships with physical contact. That would be the women in his life. He was just the voyeur. So basically, they're saying that he wasn't even participating in the services. He was the voyeur. This is their argument. The government is unable to and does not attempt to dispute this point, which alone amounts to an exceptional reason for release. Even the few other cases where the defendant of a Mann Act prosecution was a user of the services of the prostitute are completely different from the instant case. The defense bail application cited Trowbridge, Stiebeck, and Tills as examples of Johns, solely convicted of the Mann Act, who all received bonds after their conviction. The government argues that those defendants were not as culpable as Combs. That defendant Stiebeck only had one occasion of transporting a victim across straight lines. Defendant Trowbridge only had two occasions, and defendant Tills had six. What the government ignores, however, is that the defendants were members of a group called the Jesters, who brought prostitutes across state line to have intimate relations for money with the members of the group as a common practice, not just the occasions indicated. Moreover, the victims for all three defendants were victims of trafficking. They could hardly speak English and were undocumented immigrants who were tricked and coerced to work as prostitutes by a defendant in a related case who profited from their forced labor. It cannot possibly be that patronizing trafficked undocumented victims is less culpable than the conduct here, where these alleged victims were adult American men who chose to participate in the extra activity, got paid thousands of dollars, and considered themselves friends of Combs and his girlfriend. Notably, regarding Stiebeck, the defendant was a member of the Jesters, and yet the government argued that the defendant did not even have sex with the victim. Similarly, Combs did not have intimate relations with the men here. Now, let's continue. The government brushes over Collins, where the defendant was released following a mistrial on the trafficking counts, then tried for violating the Mann Act, was convicted and allowed to remain on bond pending sentence. Collins' conduct was far more egregious, as the victim called 911, stating that she is being held against her will. This shows that Combs' continued detention pending sentencing, despite his acquittal on the charges that actually involved true violence, unlike the Mann Act counts, is unwarranted and extraordinary, and these are exceptional circumstances warranting his release. The government also cited United States versus Bloomer, which it claims to show the present circumstances are not exceptional. In Bloomer, however, the defendant's exceptional reasons were solely family circumstances, which the court found was not enough to qualify as exceptional. In so finding, the court in Bloomer held that to qualify as, quote, exceptional, the reasons put forth by the defendant need not present an absolute legal novelty. An unusual legal or factual question can be sufficient, as can a substantial question in the presence of one or more remarkable and uncommon factors. That is exactly what we have here. Combs' conviction on the Mann Act counts, as well as the unusual legal application of the facts, are indeed sufficient to qualify as exceptional circumstances. MDC is an exceptional circumstances under Chavez. The government argues that Chavez is no longer pervasive authority for this court because Chavez was published over 8 months before Combs stepped foot in the MDC ECF 488 at 7. The government, however, ignores the reality at MDC, the cases since Chavez, which counsel cited, that describe the conditions there, and paints a misguided picture for the court of the reality of the conditions at the facility. They not saying that they lied to the court about what's going on at that facility, did they? Because in the last letter, they were talking about staffing increases and whatnot. The defense is saying, judge, they not telling you the full truth. They are not telling you the full truth. We continue to be grateful to the facility staff for allowing access for counsel to Combs to prepare for trial. Without this critical access, Combs would not have been able to prepare his successful defense. However, that does not change the reality of the conditions at the facility for the past 11 months. The government argues that during the defendant's stay at the MDC, the facility has made enormous strides in increasing and stabilizing their staffing level, improving medical service, and improving physical conditions. ECF 488 at 7. Though MDC initiated these efforts in 2024 after the Chavez decision, any increases in spending were reversed this year due to the federal government's aggressive budget cuts. Damn it, Trump. Woo, child. He said Elon Musk came in there and took all the money, did all the budget cuts. Not funny, haha, but funny, damn. But let's continue. For example, since January 2025, there have been cuts to BOP staffing and pay and decreases depending across the agency, exacerbating an already troubled situation. Contrary to the government's contention, living conditions at the MDC remain inhumane and the conditions seem unlikely to improve due to the aggressive government budget cuts. MDC routinely serves food that is expired and infested with maggots. The maggot infested food captured in that photo is unfortunately not an uncommon experience. Grody to the max. That's nasty. Lockdowns also remain common despite the government's claim. For example, the MDC sent a notice to detainees that they would be on lockdown from February 22nd, 2025 to at least March 3rd, 2025, because multiple inmates became disruptive and utilized weapons during an incident. This was just a few months ago. The government argues that the quote unchecked violence relied upon in Kalushi does not serve as a valid basis for finding of exceptional circumstances because this violence occurred over a year ago. Unfortunately, this shows the government's ignorance with respect to inmate violence at the MDC. On March 6, 2025, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York announced criminal charges against 25 defendants in 12 separate cases relating to violence and contraband smuggling at the MDC, all of which occurred recently between April 24th and the present. Ew. These include charges against 15 inmates for violent assaults against other inmates from May 2024 to the present, a former correctional officer for attempting to smuggle contraband into the facility in January 2025, an inmate for orchestrating a contraband smuggling operation between April and June 2024, an inmate for smuggling ceramic scalpels into a ceramic scalpel into the facility on October 12, 2024, an inmate for possession of contraband, and the list goes on. They've got an MS-13 gang associate for attempting to smuggle large packages of contraband, including 18 cell phones, the Mary Jane, and all of this stuff. Just 2 Fridays ago, an inmate above the floor Combs was on was stabbed. Finally, the government argues that Combs' bail motion is devoid of any claims that the defendant himself was impacted in any way by the conditions he alleged. Once again, this shows the government's ignorance with respect to the situation at the MDC. Let me share this real because this is what they're talking about. This is a photo that they attached to this thing where they're showing the food. I don't even know what this is. I don't even know what. Oh, look at that's there they go right there. What is right here? I don't even know what they're eating. That is nasty. Ew. And let's get back here. They have redacted a lot of stuff at situations NDC, and here is a lot of redacted stuff. I don't know why they would put this redacted stuff in a court case, but they did. So that's redacted to us. I'm quite sure that the judge didn't get anything redacted. Let's hope. The defendant will submit to any condition the court deems appropriate to assure his appearance and assure his safety. Now, this sounds like once again that they are going back through all the little things, the same information in regards to the bail, putting up his Miami home, uh, surrendering his passport, all of these different things, hiring security or having the security service with the government to check on him, the probation service, excuse me. The government argues that if extraordinary circumstances could be demonstrated, Combs fails to establish by clear and convincing evidence that he does not pose a danger to the community or a flight risk. The government is wrong. Combs has shown this court through his behavior in confinement that he does not pose a danger. Moreover, a combination of conditions, PTS monitored security, drug testing, approved visitors list, could provide the court with the necessary assurance that absolutely nothing will continue while Combs is pending sentencing. What do y'all think? Y'all think the judge may let him out? I don't know about him going back down to Miami if they allow him to do that. I don't know if they're going to let him go down to Miami or are they going to let him stay in the New York area? Because you don't want him to have a little flashback of being in the hotel. The next thing you know, he'd be freaking off again. It says here, A, the defendant does not pose a danger to others. First, despite the conviction to conditions of confinement at the NDC, Combe has not gotten into any fights. There have been no allegations of violence at the NDCs with respect to Combs, and for good reason. At trial, the defense admitted violence in connection with decades old violence and an incident of assault, which Combs was first attacked and repeatedly in June of 2024. But Combs had not participated in any violence for the past 11 months, demonstrating to the court that even in the conditions he is currently subjected to, there is unchecked violence surrounding him, and he will not commit assault. He is sober. He has been committed to bettering himself with therapy, as established in the trial record. And is committed to doing everything possible to support himself and his family. Second, the government argues that the trial record is replete with evidence of the defendant's acts of violence toward others. The witnesses the government called testified in support of racketeering, conspiracy, and trafficking charges, all of which Combs was acquitted. And stunningly, the government is trying to support Combs' petition with its failed evidence that Combs assaulted Brianna Bona Bungalong, who testified that Combs caused her substantial injury in Los Angeles at the time when he was 3,000 miles away. Ooh, that was the worst witness. That was the worst witness, and the prosecution decided to blame it on the alcohol, that she couldn't remember the dates right. And the one person that they needed, they didn't have. The government troubling also points to unsworn evidence of non-testifying individuals to try to keep Combs in custody. It had a 2-month trial where it could have, but chose not to, call these witnesses when they would have been subject to cross-examination and their allegations could have been tested. The government should not be able to support its argument with untested accusation as they did at the pretrial bail hearing. For example, it argued that Combs was violent towards Virginia Gina Hune, with whom the defendant was in a relationship at the time as Miss Ventura. She has written a letter in support of Combs' motion for bond, which is attached. Because the letter that the prosecution wrote, they did use her information, but they redacted it. And then the judge wrote a letter saying that the prosecution needed to get back with him about this redacted information and why would they put that redacted information in there. But I see this this document is replete with redacted information. If any of this was true, the government would have called this individual, but without credible evidence, the court should not consider this to continue to detain Combs. Fair argument. Finally, the government argues that Combs brutally attacked Jane in June of 2024 in the context of a freak-off. However, the court will recall that on an evening in June 2024, Jane invited Combs to her home. She had a magnum of champagne and tequila waiting. Unprompted by anything Combs said or anything that happened that evening, at one point, Jane smashed Combs' head into her kitchen counter as he was bending over to tie his shoe. She then began throwing glasses and burning candles at him, saying she hated him and called him a PDF file. She explained this by testifying that Combs was dating another woman who was older than 18 but was younger than Jane. That must have been Young Miami. She continued throwing glasses at him and believed she got hot candle wax on him. It was in this context that Combs defended himself, and several hours after that, an entertainment night allegedly occurred. The government tried Combs on this incident of trafficking, in which he was acquitted by the jury. It is disingenuous for the government to claim that this extensive history of violence, the vast majority of which occurred over a decade ago, while Combs was addicted to drugs, means he is unable to show he is not a danger to the community now. How is it that Combs, who has been in this institution for 11 months, has not been in any fights whatsoever, yet he cannot establish a clear and convincing evidence that he does not pose a danger to the community? Moreover, Combs will submit to any conditions the court views as sufficient. In closing on this point, we ask the court to focus on Combs' time at trial. Violent people are violent in jail as well. They fight with inmates, they challenge the prison staff, they sometimes align themselves with violent groups so they can be more violent. That Sean Combs has been free of violence of every sort is important to understand the man he is today. He has shown nothing but respect for the criminal justice system and everyone in it, from his first minute in jail until now. There is no reason to believe that he'll be violent or threatening anyone in any manner. Sean Combs is not a risk of flight. The government cannot seriously argue that Combs is a risk of flight given his history of flying to New York under circumstances much greater than now to face his impending federal case head on. He is and has always been an active participant in his defense and would not make the decision to flee when he has prevailed against most of the serious charges against him. When Combs was facing a life sentence, he did everything one man could to do to show his desire to come to court. Now that he is facing much less and that there is no credible reason to believe he would flee, in addition, as the court is aware, he is an active, supporting, loving father to 7 children, 4 of whom have spent the last almost 11 months without the presence of either parent. Combs is focused on returning to his life with his children and will not run from his responsibility to his children of this court. For the foregoing reasons, we ask the court to release Combs on whatever conditions this court believes are necessary pending his sentence on October 3rd. Thank you for the court's consideration. So, again, that's Mark Agnafilio and everybody else wanting to get him out of the MDC until his hearing. So, let's go over Exhibit A. And this is the letter by Gina. Now, if you're not familiar with who is Gina, Gina was supposed to be victim number 3. For whatever reason or whatever happened, she chose not to testify. Now, I will also preface to say this is also the young lady that got on Tasha K. And if you're not familiar with Tasha K is a blogger on YouTube, very popular blogger. And she was also sued by Cardi B, and Cardi B won that lawsuit. And she was sentenced to pay her about 3 point something million. So anyway, this is just who Tasha K is. Gina went to her podcast and sat down and talked about some things about Diddy. I did not watch it, but I have heard about it. So this is who Gina is. Gina was supposed to be victim 3. If you remember, one of the personal assistants had testified that he saw Diddy throwing apples at her, if you remember that testimony. But she has written a letter in support of Sean Combs. So let's see what she has written. Let's make this big. All right. Here you go. Dear Your Honor, my name is Virginia Huna, and I am writing as a person identified as victim 3 in this case. I have known Sean Combs for many years in both personal and professional capacity. From that experience, I have seen him primarily as a father, a family man, and a businessman, roles that he has always striven to uphold. I provide this letter to share my observations about his character and to respectfully request that the court permit his release on bond while the case proceeds. Baby, I wonder how much Luciano he got paid. That's the cynical Pam in me. That is the cynical Pam in me. I acknowledge and respect that Mr. Combs stands accused and that the court must weigh public safety and the integrity of the legal process. At the same time, I believe it's important for the court to have a full picture of who he is beyond the allegation. In our relationship, like many, was not perfect. We experienced ups and downs and mistakes were made, but he was willing to acknowledge his mistakes and make better decisions in the future. Over the years that followed, he made visible efforts to become a better person and to address the harm he had caused. By the time our relationship ended, he embodied an energy of love, patience, and gentleness that was markedly different from his past behaviors. To my knowledge, he has not been violent for many years and he has been committed to being a father first. I am writing because I do not view Mr. Combs as a danger to me or the community. This is his first criminal case. Throughout the investigation and proceeding, he has been cooperative, respectful, and compliant. Girl, how you know all this? You was supposed to show up in court. He has substantial ties to his family and community, including children who depend on him for emotional and financial support. Granting him bond will allow him to continue caring for his family and fulfilling his responsibilities while still subject to the court's supervision. I want to assure the court that if released, I believe Mr. Combs will adhere to all conditions imposed and will not jeopardize his freedom or the well-being of his family. Allowing him to be at home, will also support the healing process for all involved. I respectfully ask that you consider these factors when deciding his eligibility for release. Thank you for your consideration. And it is, she didn't sign it, but it says Virginia, is it Hune? Anyway. So what do you think? Child, what do you all think? Victim number three has written a letter. They have also gone back over, the defense has also gone back over the information to show that he is not a flight risk, that he feels like this is extraordinary circumstances for him being convicted under the Mann Act, and he was not a user of the services. A mess. All right, people. We have gone over. So he is still in jail at this point. I'm quite sure that the judge possibly will look at this on Monday. And we definitely will want to see what the judge has to say in regards to that. Because he's denied him bail before. Diddy has been denied the bail at least 3 or 4 times prior to being prior to the trial, and then this is the second time he's asked for bail since he's been convicted of those 2 counts under the Mann Act. Remember, each one of those counts carries 5 years. He has already spent a total, by the time they go to court in October, he would have spent a whole year in jail. Now, the defense is asking for 24 months with time served. The prosecution is asking anywhere from 51, I think they want 51 to 70 months. So we will see what the judge says if the judge provides him bail. Now, also, outside rumblings have been reported that somebody in Diddy's camp has fostered a meeting with Trump to talk about pardoning Diddy. We will see about that. We'll see how much time or whatever he gets. But there have been talks that somebody from Diddy's camp has made contact with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has said that he is watching this case. So, what do y'all think, child? This is a lot. I'm telling you, we spent so many weeks with Diddy in the trial, but it seems like we're spending almost as equal amount of time with him trying to get out on bond. So we'll see what the judge says. I'm quite sure that there will be some ruling by Monday or Tuesday. And once that happens, whenever it happens, I will come back and let you all know what is going on. So what do you think about Gina, who was supposed to be victim number three, writing a letter? What do you think about Agnifilio's argument about extraordinary circumstances, since he did not utilize the services himself? His girlfriends utilized the services, and the fact that they were purchased legally for the person's time. He purchased the men for their time. If he's basically saying if Cassie and Jane wanted to indulge in the extracurricular activities, he wasn't opposed to it. He's also arguing that the conditions at the detention center are treacherous, and they also cited a lot of stuff because this is nasty, absolutely nasty. Let me try to show it again. This is nasty food. I don't even know. Again, I don't even know what this food is. I don't know what that is. I see down here looks like coleslaw, and this looks like I don't know what these three things are. I don't know what these three things are, but these are the things. Pierogies. Mm. But they're saying that the conditions there are not tenuous. I imagine so, eating food like that. That looks nasty. But anyway, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please share this video if you care. Y'all, please tell a friend, tell a kin, tell a coworker, tell that heifer that you can't stand that I'm over here making these videos. And as always, people, Bye-bye.